Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. We begin with breaking news as Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a ceasefire and hostage deal that could pave the way for an end to the bloody and brutal 15-month war and the release of American hostages. You are looking here at reactions to the news of the agreement, which was celebrated by Palestinians in Gaza and Israelis in Tel Aviv. U.S. and Qatari officials announced the contours of the deal this afternoon, which is set to happen in 3 phases, starting with a 6-week ceasefire that would see the withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas in Gaza and the release of women, elderly and wounded hostages held by Hamas in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners. President Biden says American hostages will be among those released in this first phase. There are 3 American citizens being held in Gaza who are still believed to be alive, and we will speak to the father of one of those hostages in just a moment. In his remarks announcing the deal, President Biden laid out the details of the next 2 phases of the agreement, which are still being negotiated. We should note he accidentally referred to Hamas as Hezbollah during part of his remarks.
More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families. You know, during the next 6 weeks, Israel will negotiate the necessary arrangements to get phase 2, which is a permanent end of the war. Let me say it again, a permanent end of the war. Then, when phase 2 begins, there will be an exchange for release of the remaining living hostages, including male soldiers, and all remaining Israeli forces will be withdrawn from Gaza, and the temporary ceasefire will become permanent. And finally, phase 3, any final remains of hostages who have been killed will be returned to their families, and a major reconstruction plan for Gaza will begin.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says there are still some unresolved details that they hope to finalize tonight. Israel's Supreme Court would then have 24 hours to appeal this agreement, meaning the earliest phase 1 could take effect would be Friday, with the first group of hostages being released on Sunday, a day before Donald Trump takes office. The president-elect celebrating the deal on social media after publicly threatening that all hell would break loose if a deal wasn't reached by the time he took office. President Biden crediting Trump's Middle East envoy, who's been part of negotiations in recent days, as an important voice in these talks, noting unity between the outgoing administration and the incoming one.
I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented, for the most part, by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team. This has been time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's a genuine opportunities for a new future.
The agreement, if all 3 phases are realized, could mark the end of a brutal and deadly war. 1,200 people were killed by Hamas during its attack on October 7th, 2023. That is according to Israeli officials. The Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the ensuing war. Joining me now to start us all off to talk about this ceasefire deal is NBC international correspondent Raf Sanchez, who's been reporting on this war since it began with Hamas's attack on October 7th. NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is outside of the White House, and NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell is here on set with me. Raf, I have to start with you. What more can you tell us about how this deal came together?
Well, Kristen, these were marathon negotiations in Doha, Qatar, and they went down right to the wire. The cameras were actually rolling in the foreign ministry in Doha early this afternoon, and everyone expected the prime minister to come out and announce this agreement was sealed. But there was a last-minute hitch, a disagreement about Israeli forces leaving the Egypt-Gaza border. It's been one of the most contentious parts of these negotiations. And instead, that room remained empty for several hours while the prime minister went back to his office with the Hamas delegation and ironed out these final details. as you mentioned, President Biden talking about how this was an effort both of his administration, but also the incoming Trump administration. And you had Brett McGurk, his top Middle East advisor, in those negotiating rooms alongside Steve Witkoff, who is President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy. And officials briefed on the talk say it was extremely important for that unified front. You had both the present and the incoming administration showing that they were committed to this deal. In terms of what comes next, we are expecting Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring this deal to his cabinet likely tomorrow. It will need to pass through the Security Cabinet and then need to pass through the General Cabinet. What will be really critical is how the far right in his government reacts. We know that the most extreme minister in his government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, plans to oppose this deal. We will see whether other members of the far right do. But the expectation is that Prime Minister Netanyahu does have the votes to pass this agreement and that it will go into effect on Sunday. Kristen.
And Raf, just help us understand, you've been covering this war since it began. What does this mean both for Israel and the Palestinians if this, in fact, does go forward, the ceasefire agreement, if some of the hostages are finally released?
Well, Kristen, this hostage crisis has been an open wound for Israel. October 7th was an unprecedented trauma, but in some ways it never ended because there were still Israelis being held inside of Gaza, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. And so for the people of Israel, there is a hope that this will finally bring some closure. This will finally be an end to October 7th when that last hostage comes out of Gaza. In terms of the suffering of the Palestinian people of Gaza, the 2 million civilians who have been caught in the crossfire here, there are very few words to describe what they have gone through over the last 15 months or so. I have been inside Gaza 5 times since the start of the war with the Israeli military. In every direction, as far as the eye can see, the destruction is comprehensive. The majority of homes are destroyed in many of the big population centers like Gaza City. The healthcare system is collapsed. You have people who have not had enough food, not had enough medicine. You've had babies literally freezing to death as the winter sets in recent weeks. So this is desperately needed relief for the Palestinian people inside of Gaza, and they are hoping and praying tonight that this ceasefire will hold. Kristen.
Raf Sanchez, as always, thank you so much for your great reporting. We really appreciate it. Aaron, let me turn to you now, covering the White House. This deal coming just hours before President Biden set to give his final farewell address from the White House. You've been talking to your sources there inside the administration. What do they say this moment means?
Well, Kristen, I think this is an incredibly significant moment for President Biden, for this administration. We know that it's important for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, for the hostages and the families of the hostages that have been involved in this for more than a year now, particularly for the American families that have been involved in this. We know that President Biden has spoken with different members of these families several times over the course of the last year. We know that there are still 7 Americans that are being held inside Gaza, 4 of whom the State Department says is still alive. And so for President Biden, it's been critically important to try to get this done for those families. At the same time, as you take a look at the larger foreign policy work of this president, we know that he said at the beginning, and he repeated this week, that he believes that American leadership really is paramount to global success and security. And so we've seen him take action as it relates to Ukraine. We've seen him take action in the Indo-Pacific. But really what's been happening in the Middle East has been at the center, if you will, of his efforts as it relates to foreign policy. And so seeing this deal come together, a second deal, we know the first one came together shortly after the initial attack on October 7th, 2023. Seeing this deal come together now with 5 days, Kristen, left in this administration is something that is very important to this president, something that he desperately wanted to see happen before he leaves office. And I would imagine, Kristen, we will hear him talk more about it in his final Oval Office address tonight.
I anticipate we will. That's a really good point. Aaron, let me ask you about the fact that President-elect Trump claiming responsibility, taking the credit for this getting over the finish line. He did have his Middle East envoy in the room there, and you heard President Biden talk about the fact that that was significant. What role is the administration saying President Biden's team played in reaching this agreement?
You know, it's really interesting when you listen to how the Biden administration has been talking about this interaction with the transition team for President-elect Trump. Obviously, you noted the president-elect went to his social media platform almost immediately after we heard that Hamas had agreed to this deal and said that it was an epic success and said that it wouldn't have been possible had he not won the election. So you set that aside. You have President Biden come before the cameras. You had his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who is still, I think, in her briefing. We saw the State Department briefing happen as well. And in each of those instances, you heard them say that President Biden and his team built the framework for this deal. They put it out there in May of last year, and this is the deal that ultimately was agreed to today. There's that. And then the president and all these other people have said that Steve Witkoff, President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy, has been on the ground in the room side by side with Brett McGurk, the president's coordinator for the Middle East, working on the final details of this deal, which we understand really just came together in the last 96 hours or so, and that he was a key partner in that effort, that they wanted to make sure that there had been two teams that were speaking as one team effectively, knowing that the incoming administration will be the one that is a guarantor of this deal as it goes forward, Kristen.
All right, Aaron Gilchrist at the White House, thank you so much. Look forward to your reporting throughout the evening, including on President Biden's farewell address. Let me turn now to Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, how extraordinary this development is. Just your reaction and key takeaways about how this came together for you.
Well, you and I have been together on this since October 7th. And it's so dramatic. It's so emotional for those families, for those of us who've spent so much time with them. I've been on so many missions with Secretary Blinken and with the others going back and forth to all the countries in the region. You realize how fragile this all was. They thought it would all come together at 3 o'clock this morning in Doha. On the second floor, you had the Israeli, American, and Qatari negotiators. 2 floors down, you had the Hamas team, the same building. They thought it had all come together. They're celebrating. And then a couple of hours later, Hamas comes back with some more negotiating demands, some last-minute haggling, as you heard Rolf say, over that key corridor, the Philadelphia corridor, which is where Israel is supposed to withdraw from rather the populated areas in central Egypt, central Gaza, and have the remaining forces in that Philadelphia corridor and then in another buffer zone until there can be an Arab or a Palestinian force that comes in. But the emotions of all of this that finally came together, Steve Witkoff was important in those last 96 hours, not in the room, the actual room where it was happening, but going back and forth and coming up with some key ideas, according to the Israelis, in these last moments.
Well, it's fascinating to hear your reporting on this, Andrea. And you think about phase 2. This is phase 1 we're talking about. And again, as Rolf laid out, the Israeli cabinet has to approve it. And of course.
And I'm told that's going to be almost automatic.
OK, that's an important detail. So these hostages could potentially start coming home in the next few days. And then I guess the question, Andrea, becomes how difficult will it be to get a phase 2? Question.
Well, it's going to be difficult because this whole thing has been difficult, as what happened in these last 24 hours tells you. It fell apart July 31st when Israel attacked Hania, the Hamas negotiator, in Tehran. It then fell apart and came to a complete halt again on August 31st when Hersh Goldberg was killed and 5 others in the tunnels in Rafah. So that was a complete breakdown. What then changed was Israel going after Hezbollah, destroying Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the big change there. And then the fall of the Assad regime and also the weakening of Iran with Israel's counterattack against Iran and getting out many of Iran's air defenses. So Iran is weakened. They're the Hamas sponsors. Hamas finally really came to the table. Brett McGurk went back. He's been there endlessly. He was back over the Christmas holidays up until Christmas and then back again. And Steve Witkoff joined about 4 or 5 days ago, and in the last 96 hours was terribly important. I think to get it to phase 2 is going to be difficult, but that the ceasefire will continue as long as negotiations are continuing, and we are going to at least see the initial wounded women, hostages coming out potentially this weekend.
And that brings me to my next question, Andrea. What are you learning about which hostages are going to be released first? And Americans are expected to be a part of this group.
We believe that there will be 3 women who are all Israeli and in very bad shape. That's what we've been told by multiple sources. The hostage families have been told this as well. Ruby Khan was there all last week talking to all the negotiators, talking to Brett McGurk. He knows that his son has died, but he wants his son home, as do the others, the 4 Americans who have been killed. But there are 3 surviving Americans, and we believe that the elderly, Keith Siegel, likely to be one of the first out. He's 65 years old. Another likely person is Sagui Dekel-Chen, and then, Egan Alexander. But, we can't really be specific. We're being very careful about this. We're trying not to, get anyone's hopes up, but we believe that they will be coming out among the first group.
Well, we are going to speak to Sagui Dekel-Chen's father coming up momentarily. We will ask him what he knows. We pray he is among those. Andrea, thank you so much for being here on just a significant moment. It is. It's
just one quick point. Bill Burns made 19 multi-country trips. Tony Blinken, 13, just since October 7th. And importantly, the president went on October 18th to Israel.
Really important points. Andrea, as always, you deepen our understanding of this just extraordinary moment. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Coming up, as I just mentioned, I will speak to the father of an Israeli-American hostage who's been held captive in Gaza for 15 months. About the news, what Andrea just said, his son may be among those finally coming home. Plus, Mr. Trump's pick for Attorney General in the hot seat defending her ties to the president-elect as the Senate holds confirmation hearings for half a dozen cabinet picks. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Turning to Capitol Hill now, where it has been a jam-packed day of crucial confirmation hearings. But perhaps the most critical hearing today was for President-elect Trump's pick to be Attorney General, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was grilled by Judiciary Committee Democrats about her close ties to Trump and her ability to remain independent. Bondi is a longtime Trump ally, having served on his defense team during his first impeachment trial and later backing his false claims about election fraud in 2020. But under oath today, Bondi told the committee that if confirmed, she would serve the people, not the president.
I believe that the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. The number one job is to enforce the law fairly and even-handedly. And that's what will be done if I am confirmed as the Attorney General.
So you will provide an assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts and the law, and the White House will play no role in cases investigated or brought?
Senator, it will be my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, to make those decisions. Politics will not play a part.
As Attorney General, if confirmed, who would be your client?
My oath would be to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The people of America would be my client. And it is also my job to advise the president. My client are the people of America.
Democrats on the committee pressed Bondi on the issue of her independence, asking if she'd stand up to President-elect Trump if he asked her to do something improper or illegal. Here's how she responded.
Can you clarify for me that in following ethics and the law, you'd be willing to resign if ordered to do something improper?
Senator, I wouldn't work at a law firm. I wouldn't be a prosecutor. I wouldn't be Attorney General. If anyone asked me to do something improper and I felt I had to carry that out, of course I would not do that.
Now, Bondi also downplayed a so-called enemies list compiled by Trump's pick to run the FBI, Kash Patel, who would report to Bondi if she's confirmed.
I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm questioning you right now
do.
about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice. Mr. Patel, if he works with running the FBI, if he is confirmed, and if I am confirmed, he will follow the law if I am the Attorney General of the United States of America, and I don't believe he would do anything otherwise.
Now, to be sure, Bondi has vowed to investigate so-called bad prosecutors who investigated Mr. Trump, and she did not back down on those comments today, even after vowing to keep politics out of the Justice Department. This all comes after President-elect Trump campaigned on vows to go after, even jail, his political enemies. Last month, when I sat down with Mr. Trump, he said he would ultimately defer to his Attorney General on all of those matters. Even as Bondi tried to reassure senators of her independence, her loyalty to President-elect Trump was clear during the hearing, and she would not say Mr. Trump lost the 2020 election despite being given multiple opportunities to do so. Look.
Are you prepared to say today under oath without reservation that Donald Trump lost the presidential contest to Joe Biden in 2020?
Ranking Member Durbin, President Biden is the President of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the President of the United States. There was a peaceful transition of power. President Trump left office and was overwhelmingly elected in 2024.
I want to ask you a factual question. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden is the President of the United States.
Joining me now, NBC's Sahil Kapoor on Capitol Hill, and NBC's Ryan Riley is with me on set. He covers the Justice Department. Sahil, let me start with you. What were your key takeaways? Some fireworks there at the hearing today.
Yeah, a few things, Kristen. Bondi certainly walked the line there. She was steering clear of Donald Trump's personal no-fly zones, most notably by refusing to admit that he lost the 2020 election. She also said she had not heard the call between Trump and Georgia's top elections official, Brad Raffensperger, where Trump asked him to find more votes to overturn his narrow loss in Georgia. She didn't directly say whether violent January 6th rioters should be pardoned. Again, that's an open question where Trump is going to go with that. And as you just played there, she waffled on whether FBI nominee Kash Patel's comments about using prosecutorial power against the media is something that she would, take a clear stand on, given that the FBI will report to her department. Now, on the policy front, it's important to note Bondi didn't commit to upholding the availability of mifepristone, the abortion pill, said simply she would look at that law. But she did notably respond in the affirmative when asked if she would defend the right of same-sex couples to marry. And she insisted again and again, as you played, that her loyalty will be to the American people, that her client is the American people, not Donald Trump. And finally, she did allow that Donald Trump is ineligible to run for president again in 2028 unless they change the Constitution.
Well, you've ticked through a lot, Sahil. I want to play one more piece of sound from Bondi at the hearing when she was asked about potential politicization of the DOJ. Look at this.
I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
Sahil, that's, to your point, she was very in line with what the president-elect, with frankly what other Republicans who support him want to hear. How did that go over in the committee room?
Well, one Republican senator, John Cornyn, literally used the phrase music to my ears to talk about Pam Bondi's testimony. So clearly she was well received by the Republican majority members on the panel. Now, Bondi repeatedly insisted, as you just played there, that the Justice Department was weaponized and it was targeted against Trump. That is simply the price of admission to get nominated by Donald Trump. She wouldn't be standing there or sitting there testifying before this committee as the nominee for AG if she wasn't willing to take that position. And when asked how she'd react to potential illegal order by Donald Trump, she didn't say, she only refused to accept the premise that Donald Trump would ever do that. The big question I have here, Kristen, is that if confirmed, does Bondi take her cues from candidate Trump, who did run on a platform of retribution, or does she take her cues from President-elect Trump, who, of course, told you after the election that his retribution will be his success? That is the open question that I think a lot of Democrats were trying to get an answer to, and I don't think they were particularly satisfied.
Sahil, a really fascinating point, and it's the question we'll all be watching. We have to wait and see if she is, in fact, confirmed, but it seems like, based on what you are saying, she could have the votes to get confirmed. Let me turn to Ryan Riley. Now, Ryan, first of all, was that your sense? I mean, it seemed like everyone was, Republicans at least, were lining up in support of her. What were the biggest takeaways for you?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything standing in the way right now of Pam Bondi being confirmed as the Attorney General. It seems like as though she's going to be into that slot. And she, I think, to borrow a legal phrase, I think the preponderance of evidence suggests that Pam Bondi doesn't actually think the election was stolen, right? Come on, that's not something that a really intelligent person like her, who's risen to this level in her career and held these really important positions and been a lawyer all the way throughout her life and been a person who's been about the facts and the law. And that's sort of why we saw her fade away, I think, very quickly from this effort to overturn the 2020 election very quickly. We saw her at that press conference in Philadelphia, and then all of a sudden she faded into the background, almost like Homer Simpson fading into the bushes, right? Suddenly it was, Rudy Giuliani doing the Four Seasons total landscaping thing. And I think it's because she wanted to maintain a degree of, be respected by her colleagues. And that was not something you can do. You cannot be respected by your colleagues and also oppose just basic common sense and facts.
So let me ask you about, in terms of what we heard today, you've reported so extensively on January 6th. You've written about it. What did you make of her response when she was asked about President-elect Trump's plans to pardon some of the January 6th rioters, those who've not only been convicted, but a lot of folks who've pleaded guilty? He told me, yes, he's going to look at each case individually, but he also said even some of the people who pleaded guilty did so under pressure, and so he's open to potentially pardoning them as well. She claimed she wasn't entirely clear on everything that he'd said about this.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things is after your interview, I got one of the most agreement I've gotten through such a wide spectrum of individuals. Everyone from January 6 defendants to Donald Trump supporters to online sleuths who have identified hundreds of these people to members of law enforcement said it was abundantly clear to them that Donald Trump had no clue what he was talking about when it came to these cases individually. He just doesn't have the basic education about them. And so I think that that's what's, going to be this big question going forward. She's trying to figure out where his lines are, what he's ultimately going to do, because I think behind the scenes there's this effort to educate Donald Trump, because I don't think he's seen a lot of these really vicious videos of members, and obviously that's going to be really difficult for Republicans to defend if one of our colleagues can walk up to a member of Congress and say, hey, are you okay with this person who's slamming this officer in the face getting pardoned? You good with that? That's going to be difficult for them to overcome. This is going to be a hurdle for them in the next midterms. If that's something, it's a vulnerability, I think, for Republicans. So I think there is this effort right now to sort of pull back Donald Trump from the line, maybe throw some cases at him that he can pardon. There are about 700 cases that he could pardon that would have no practical impact, so he could get a big number there. I think that's what's going on sort of behind the scenes here.
Ryan Riley, great reporting as always. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Sahil, thank you from Capitol Hill. Appreciate it. I know it was a busy one there. Coming up next, my one-on-one interview with the father of an Israeli-American hostage who is hoping that his son will be coming home as part of this just-announced ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We're continuing to follow the breaking news that Israel and Hamas have reached a deal for a ceasefire and the release of hostages in Gaza. As of last month, 94 hostages are believed to be held captive in Gaza, including 3 Americans who are believed to still be alive. Joining me now is Jonathan Dekel-Chen. His son, Sagui, is among the American hostages still in Gaza. Mr. Dekel-Chen, thank you for being here, and we are so sorry for everything that you and your family have been through, and for those hostages who are no longer with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'd like to start, with your permission, just with one clarification. There are 7 American citizens who are still being held in Gaza, 3 presumed alive, among them my son, 4 confirmed dead. So the job is bigger than just the 3, we hope, living U.S. citizens.
Well, you make such an important point because we know that their families want them to come home and that is just as important. So thank you for that. Can you give us your reaction to hearing that there appears to be a hostage deal? Have you been in touch with Biden officials? Do you know if your son is, in fact, among those coming home?
We don't know. There's a lot of background noise. I mean, like you, I imagine, heard President Biden's statement an hour or 2 ago. We, of course, remain hopeful, but we live in a very volatile time, in an extremely volatile area in the Middle East. And it's simply, until he is home, until any of the hostages are home, really, we cannot be sure. And the job will only be done when all 98 of the hostages are home, those who may still be alive and those who have already been murdered by Hamas.
Have you had any contact with the Biden or incoming Trump administrations in the wake of this ceasefire deal being announced?
No, not yet. I imagine there will be contacts. We've had incredibly open and embracing conversations with the Biden administration now for the last 15 months. And we've had some informal conversations with the certain senior officials of the incoming Trump administration. And, all of them have given and made us confident that they're completely committed to getting all of the hostages home. But since the announcement earlier today, we haven't had any updates from any officials.
Do you know how your son is doing in terms of his health? Have you had any updates in terms of how he is doing in that regard over the past several weeks or months?
No, I think it's important to remember that Hamas has never allowed visits by the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, or any other international organization of any of the hostages, so that there's no sure way to know what any of their condition is. The last positive proof of life that we had for Sagui was over a year ago, immediately following the first hostage release. About 100 women and children were released. Of those, a few had seen Sagui in the tunnels under Gaza. They were able to tell us that he was alive, but they also told us at the same time, over a year ago, that many other men were alive, men from our kibbutz community, who subsequently we know were murdered by Hamas. So the fact that we have proof of life from over a year ago, unfortunately, doesn't mean very much right now.
We are waiting for the Israeli Security Cabinet to take this deal up, to vote on it. If you could speak to them directly, what would your message be to the cabinet?
Well, my message would be this is the moment where you show the Israeli prove to the Israeli people and to history, for that matter, of the Jewish people and history at large, that you understand the enormity of this moment. Whatever your narrow political considerations might be, whatever risks this might entail for you in terms of the next round of elections in Israel, whatever that might be, the only right thing to do, and over 75% of all Israelis insist that the only right thing to do is to finish a deal that will bring the hostages home as fast as possible. So I would implore them to, whatever political interests they might have, listen to the people of Israel and listen to history. It will not judge them well if they do not follow through all phases of this hostage agreement.
Well, you're incredibly brave to speak out, and I think the entire country, nation, world is with you in this moment. And it's so hard to think about what you have been through. What has life been like for you and your family since October 7th?
Well, it's been a living hell. We are all from Kibbutz Nir Oz, a small community on the border with Gaza that was invaded on October 7th, 2023, by a couple hundred heavily armed terrorists and a few hundred looters, some of them armed, some of them not. And they rampaged through our small community for 9 hours, killing 59 of our 400 and something people, men, women, children, and kidnapping 79 and completely destroying our homes and our property. So in addition to the horror of having hostages, both for my family, my biological family, and my extended kibbutz family, there's still 29 of us of the Nir Oz people of the total 98 who are hostages. It's been, it's as I said before, it's simply been a living hell for the last 15 months.
Well, we are just so sorry for everything you have been through. Just finally, what do you want folks to know about your son and frankly, about the strength of your family, that you have endured this and you're still able to put one foot in front of the other, to speak publicly, to call for the release of your son?
Well, I have a goal, and I think it's everyone in our family has the same goal. It is to get Sagui home, to have his 3 little girls run into his arms, leap into his arms, the youngest of whom has never met him. She was born 2 months after the massacre on Nir Oz. She only knows him as a poster on the wall. And for him to be able to renew this beautiful life that he'd been living, and productive and important life that he'd been living with in the family that he had been growing with his wife. That's, a young man like so many of the hostages taken who can benefit the world by, through freedom instead of suffering daily, hourly in these hellholes that Hamas has created. And no less by virtue of releasing Sagui and the other 97 hostages, some semblance of normal life can return to the people of Gaza, who have been very much captives of Hamas for the last 15 months.
Well, we pray for that moment that you talk about and for those beautiful children to be able to hug their father. Thank you so much, Jonathan Dekel-Chen. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your family's story.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up after the break, with just days to go before Trump's inauguration, what the breakthrough in the Mideast could mean for the new administration as President Biden prepares to deliver a farewell address to the nation tonight. Do stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As we've been reporting amid the breaking news of the ceasefire in the Middle East, something the White House has been working towards for more than a year, President Biden is set to deliver a farewell address tonight from the Oval Office. The president expected to focus on his administration's major accomplishments, including lowering prescription drug prices and creating more than 16 million jobs. In a letter previewing his address, President Biden alluded to the state of the country when he first took office, writing, quote, "We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans and we braved through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure." Joining me now on set, Tia Mitchell, Washington bureau chief for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, former Michigan Democratic Congressman Andy Levin. He is now a distinguished senior fellow at the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and former Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Charlie Dent, now executive director of the Aspen Institute Congressional Program. Thanks to all of you for being here. Tia, I have to start with you. President Biden's going to be delivering this address against the backdrop of having just announced this ceasefire agreement. It's a significant moment for him, and this was the type of progress he's been working towards for over a year. Finally, it's here as he's about to leave office.
Yeah, I think this ceasefire is the last big accomplishment that President Biden hoped to make before he left office. So he was able to accomplish that which he set out to do. And I think for him, when you add up and look at the long list that accompanied the letter you referenced, there's a lot he did accomplish in 4 years. There's a lot that I think he wants to celebrate. But this speech is going to be bittersweet, of course, because he's not leaving quite on his own terms. We all know that he not only wanted a second term, but more so did not want Donald Trump returning to the White House.
Yeah, Andy, I think that states it very well. This is a bittersweet moment for President Biden. And boy, the parallels between President Biden and former President Jimmy Carter, who we just, of course, laid to rest, they're staggering, particularly when you think about this hostage agreement just announced, just as he's about to leave office. What do you make of this moment for President Biden?
Well, it is bittersweet. I think he worked so hard for so long to accomplish this. Basically, the agreement, as we see it, is about what he announced last May, and it took until now to get it. So that's really unfortunate for him. It's horribly unfortunate for those hostage families, for the people of Israel, for the people of Gaza who suffered just incredibly. But, you know, President Biden is going to be remembered for his long political career in the Senate and as vice president, and as having a very productive 4 years as president of the United States, especially his accomplishments on domestic policy. Ironic, he was chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate for so long, but the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Science Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill coming roaring out of COVID compared to how we limped out of, through the Great Recession so long after the last big downturn. History will remember a lot of great things about his presidency.
Charlie, it's so interesting. Incoming administration officials with the Trump administration were working with the Biden administration to secure this ceasefire agreement. President-elect Trump taking credit for this. He says this epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed. What do you make of the reaction from President-elect Trump? I know you're not in the room in these negotiations, but is it justified?
Well, should any of us be shocked that he's taking credit for the release of the hostages? Of course not. Of course he's going to take credit for that and just about anything else that he perceives to be good. He always does that. I suspect he is mightily relieved that this deal has been struck, and it looks like that not only the hostages will be released, but this war will end. We all hope. And so if I'm President Trump, he should just say thank you. Less is more. But with Donald Trump, you're always going to get more.
Well, and that's right. He warned that all hell would break loose if the hostages were not released by the time he took office. Tia, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the confirmation hearings so far. We've had Hegseth, a lot of fireworks there yesterday. Of course, President-elect Trump's pick to run the Pentagon. And then today we had Pam Bondi, his pick to be Attorney General. By the way, Senator Marco Rubio also had his confirmation hearing today. It seems like that was pretty smooth sailing. I don't think there were many.
It's good to be a senator.
Yes, by all accounts. He has support. The question is how much bipartisan support for Marco Rubio. So far, what have been some of your key takeaways from what you've witnessed?
So what I've watched with these hearings, and I think Marco Rubio is going to sail through with bipartisan support. He might be among the most popular, get one of the highest kind of vote tallies, if you will, in the confirmation process. But when it comes to Hegseth, and to a slightly lesser extent, Pam Bondi, it's not so much about even bipartisan support. It's not so much about how many Democrats will support them, even though I think Pam Bondi might get some Democrat support, maybe. But it's about making sure that you keep the Republican coalition together. And so for Pam Bondi, that means she couldn't go too far on how she talked about the 2020 election because she doesn't want to turn off any potential Republican votes. She can only lose up to 3. Hegseth is going to have a tougher go at that, but it even looks like after his hearing yesterday that a lot of Republicans felt that they were inclined to support him.
Joni Ernst saying that she's now a yes on Pete Hegseth. She had been one of the biggest potential roadblocks. I want to play a little bit of an exchange with Pam Bondi and Adam Schiff today. Get everyone's reaction on the other side. Take a look.
You seem reluctant.
I have not.
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question. The president also wants to jail Liz Cheney. Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual basis to investigate Liz Cheney? Yes or no?
Senator, that's a hypothetical, and I'm not going to answer that question.
No, it's not hypothetical. I'm asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has asked me to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president has
We're
called,
also
the
worried
president,
about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
You know
called
what we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
The
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are
through
aware,
the roof.
Ms.
Charlie, what do you make of that exchange? And after all, in my one-on-one interview with President-elect Trump, he did say, I think Liz Cheney should be jailed. The fact that she didn't directly answer, does that hurt her at all?
Well, I think it'll certainly hurt her with many of the Democrats. She's going to be confirmed, and she certainly has all the credentials and the qualifications to be the Attorney General. Her challenge is how much fealty must she show to Donald Trump, and how much independence can she exercise. This is going to be a challenge for her, probably more than any other cabinet official, trying to straddle that. And I don't know that she'll be successful. She tried today; it didn't look particularly good, but it won't affect her nomination.
Andy, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation for the country to be in, but she was much better prepared than Pete Hegseth. And besides that last little comment about the crime rate in California, which was ridiculous, she was much more disciplined.
And Tia, just finally, before we go, there's also going to be a lot of focus on Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, for a range of different reasons. Some policy issues. She also made these 2 secret trips to Syria. She has been accused of sympathizing, making statements that seem to be sympathetic to Russia. What do you be watching for there?
Again, I think it's how she answers the questions, and can she give Republicans enough that they choose to stick with her, mainly to help Trump get the team that he says he wants. She's got to make sure she stays as disciplined as possible and, quite frankly, figures out a way to answer the questions in a way that doesn't tick off Trump, but that also makes senators believe that, okay, it's okay, I can support her.
That's the challenging fine line to walk. Thank you all for a great conversation. Charlie, Andy, and Tia. Appreciate it. Coming up, just hours after the ceasefire deal was struck in the Middle East, President-elect Trump's pick to be the next ambassador to the United Nations will face senators for her confirmation hearing. The next installment of our Meet the Cabinet series is next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The breaking news we've been covering throughout this hour that Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire deal will likely factor into tomorrow's confirmation hearing for Elise Stefanik, the New York Congresswoman, a longtime Trump ally who the president-elect has tapped to be his ambassador to the United Nations, is the latest installment of our Meet the Cabinet series. NBC campaign embed Alex Tabbitt takes a deep dive into Stefanik's background.
President Trump has fought for us. It is now our opportunity to fight for him.
President-elect Donald Trump has chosen Representative Elise Stefanik as his pick for ambassador to the United Nations. Born in Albany, New York, Stefanik studied government at Harvard and was vice president of the university's Institute of Politics. Then she joined the George W. Bush administration. She served on the president's Domestic Policy Council staff and in the Chief of Staff's office. And in 2013, she ran for Congress in upstate New York as a virtual unknown.
I'm running for Congress because Washington needs to be reminded of the American dream.
Winning the race in New York's 21st district and becoming the youngest woman ever elected in the House.
Tonight, we made a little history in the North Country.
During her decade in Congress, Stefanik served on the House Armed Services Committee, the Committee on Education and the Workforce, and the Select Committee on Intelligence. She became the youngest woman to serve in House leadership, chairing the House Republican Conference and becoming the 4th highest-ranking Republican in the House. But it was during Trump's first impeachment that Stefanik grabbed national headlines.
So this was day 2 of an abject failure of Adam Schiff and his regime of secrecy.
Questioning witnesses.
Was there any reference to withholding aid?
No, there was not.
Any reference to bribery?
No, there was not.
Any reference to quid pro quo?
No, there was not.
Any reference to extortion?
No, there was not.
And capturing Trump's attention.
But did I not realize when she opens that mouth, you were killing them, Elise? You were killing them.
After the 2020 election, Stefanik echoed Trump's baseless claims that it was stolen.
I plan to object to certain contested electors on January 6th.
While Stefanik has limited foreign policy experience, she is a staunch supporter of Israel.
And I will continue to make it my mission in the halls of the United States Congress at the highest level to make sure that all the military support is provided to Israel.
And her confrontation with university presidents at a congressional hearing about anti-Semitism on college campuses went viral.
Calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again,
It depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
With two of those Ivy League presidents stepping down in the weeks following that hearing.
I watched her run over the head of Harvard, the head of Penn.
Stefanik has been deeply critical of the United Nations, accusing it of being anti-Semitic, threatening to reassess U.S. funding, and vowing to bring Trump's America First philosophy to the UN. Alex Tabbitt, NBC News.
And our thanks to Alex for that fantastic reporting. I'm back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. We'll have live special coverage of President Biden's farewell address tonight. It starts at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on NBC News Now. The news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.